So this story is about fresh perspectives over time and space. You might not recognize a Buddhist nun. I mean, when I was a graduate student at CU Boulder in 1994, the only nuns I knew of were the ones from my childhood, the Catholic nuns, that patrolled the hallways. The ones from The Hills Are Alive. What is that? The Sound of Music, right? They were stern, they were quiet, and they wore those starched black and white habits. How do you solve a problem like Maria? But that all changed in the summer of '94 when my girlfriend Linda landed a research project, a 3-month research project in Lhasa, Tibet. Now, this was focused on altitude medicine, and it perfectly fitted Lhasa, which is friggin' high, 12,000 feet above sea level. And she invited me to come along. So we arranged this rendezvous at the end of her research. Did I know anything about altitude medicine? Absolutely not. But she still signed me up and registered me as a lab tech, because that was the only way I was going to get into the country at the time, because the tourist visas were so strict. So I fly through Hong Kong, through Chengdu, and finally arrive in Lhasa. I'm like lightheaded. The air is so thin, but thankfully they didn't ask me a single physiology question at the border. So we go back to the Yak Hotel. That's where Linda had been holed up for the last 2 months or so. And she had met this wonderful cadre of expats in Lhasa. And a particularly interesting couple had just finished publishing probably the first trekking guide around Lhasa. One day, we went for butter tea at the Bar Corps. This is like the central square in Lhasa. And they said, Chris and Linda, there's actually one route that we left out of the book, and we want to share it with you. So they passed us these notes and secret maps on like napkins in this cafe, and it described this trek over this 17,000-foot pass into this high valley that was sprinkled with yak herder yurts, and then a whole trail of monasteries of all shapes and sizes. Now, why did they leave it out of the book? Well, for one, this was an area that was completely banned by the Chinese government. And so, of course, Linda and I had to do this. So we went back to the hotel, and we improvised our backpacking provisions. In Lhasa, especially in '94, you can't just go to the Whole Foods and to the bulk section and get your trail mix, right? Instead, we found ourselves cracking walnuts in the hinge of our hotel door. We went around the corner and we commissioned the tailor to create stuff sacks because there was no REI. And finally, about 2 weeks later, we got on the road. A few days after that, we're about 25 miles north of Lhasa, where the secret map said we ought to find a nunnery. So, and there's these candy-colored Buddhist prayer flags fluttering in the wind, so we knew that we were getting close. And below us, there are some ramshackle stone buildings, and from the buildings, I could smell this juniper incense and this rancid yak butter that they use for votive candles. Out from the buildings emerged these young women, about as curious about us as we were about them. And that's when I knew that we had actually found the right place. These women, their heads were shaved, and instead of the starched black and white habits, they wore these flowing saffron-colored robes. But probably most shocking of all was they weren't these tight-lipped, stern nuns. They giggled. They were having a blast. And so the only thing that was a little disconcerting about the whole situation, I had to say, it was the stray dogs and cats. Now, you have to understand, I grew up in one of these no, you can't have one pet-free households. So I never really got comfortable with animals. Well, these nuns, they were just completely at ease with all manners of yaks or cows, strays or ferals. And I guess it makes sense, right? I mean, that cat, why, that could have been a reincarnation of your favorite aunt. So, aunts, that's what they called them, you know. They called the nuns Ani in Tibet. And it goes back to a story in 6th century BC where the aunt of the Buddha himself finally shaved her head and put on yellow clothes and was allowed to start the order of the Buddhist nuns. So back at the nunnery, Linda and I are getting to know these nuns. They're incredibly generous. We're sharing our photos. We have these photos from home, and finally they reciprocate. One of them squeaks open a drawer from a chest, and pulls out this tattered photograph, and we recognize it immediately. They hand it to us reverently in two palms. It is the portrait of His Holiness, the Dalai Lama. 2 weeks later, after many more adventures, we return to Lhasa. We're filthy, we're hungry, we're engaged to be married. But on a more sour note, we learn that a few days after we were at that nunnery, the nuns staged a demonstration which led to the arrest of 5 of the nuns. We don't know if it was something that we said or something that we showed, but ever since that day, we wondered what happened. We wondered what happened to those 5 nuns. Can I get 1 minute? Fast forward 2.5 decades. I'm married to Linda. We have 2 cars, 2 kids, and yes, even 2 cats. I'm late to work. And it's not just any day of work. I have finally scored that interview with the first female candidate for my team. I have to be there on time, but I'm not going to be there on time. I'm pedaling madly to make the FF1 bus. And as I pull into the bus stop, I see this woman on a bench. Her head is shaved, and there's something familiar about that peach-colored sweatshirt that she's wearing. But I can't think too much because I need to pull my bike in. I'm whipping out my kryptonite lock. I can hear the bus coming behind me. I'm not going to make it. And I just say out loud, I was trying to make that bus. The woman says, oh, they always stop for me. And that's when I notice for the first time when she gets up that she's got a forearm crutch. And I don't know if she's sick or she's crazy, but she waves that crutch in the air and the bus squeals to a stop. I finish locking my bike, and she's just standing there in front of the bus. The driver's waving her in. I walk around her and up the stairs. I sit down at the window, and she's still not coming on. Finally, she takes the first step, and she takes something out of her shoulder bag. It looks like a cross between like a garden hose sprayer and a hypodermic needle. She giggles, and she says, look at my new tattoo gun, to the driver, who shakes his head. She steps back off the bus. He rolls his eyes, closes the door, and we start heading off. I look down, and she's back at the bench. Through the half-toned window, through 25 years, I give her a thumbs up. And I don't know exactly what happened to those 5 Ani back in Tibet, but I swear, this one just winked. Thank you.